tremendously powerful water, this super hot water. And I mentioned that in 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted with a force equal to a 20 megaton atomic bomb.
This chart illustrates the relative size of various historic volcanoes. The one I mentioned, Mount St. Helens, on May the 18th, 1980, exploded with a force equal to a 20 megaton atomic bomb and produced 1 cubic kilometer of volcanic ash. Compare that to Vesuvius in AD 79. It buried the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. It produced 3 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash, 3 times the size of Mount St. Helens. Or what about Krakatoa, 1883 in Indonesia? The eruption of Krakatoa was the single most violent explosion in recorded history. It was so violent that the sound of the eruption was heard in downtown London, England. Krakatoa produced 18 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash, 18 times the size of Mount St. Helens, but that is still small compared to Tambora, 1815 in Indonesia. Tambora was not as violent as Krakatoa, but it was incredibly dirty. It produced 80 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash, 80 times the size of Mount St. Helens.
Now, you don't have to believe me. You can look this up for yourself. Just go to the internet, to a good encyclopedia. Look up the year 1816. 1816 is described as the year without summer because 1 year after this volcano erupted in Indonesia, putting 80 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash into the Earth's atmosphere, the ash so blanketed the Earth, blocking out sunlight. The sunlight bounced off the top of the layer of ash back into outer space. Heat, light were reflected off the top of the ash layer back into outer space. The Earth's atmosphere cooled so fast that the very next summer there was no summer in Europe. It snowed in all 12 months of the year in Europe in 1816. So I'd like to ask you a question. If one volcano can cool the Earth so rapidly that the next year there is no summer, what would happen if 20, 30, 40,000 volcanoes all went off at the same time? What would you get? What was that? Oh, you get an ice age. That's right. You know, when I was in school as a child, they taught me there were 11 different ice ages. Today, at least in California where I grew up, they teach there were 4 ice ages. But the truth is there was only 1 ice age. It is mentioned in the Bible. You'll find it in chapter 38 of the book of Job. It's the first mention of ice and snow in the entire Bible. Well, let's think. At the time of the flood of Noah, thousands and thousands of volcanoes erupt all over the Earth's surface. The ash goes up into the upper atmosphere, blocks out sunlight. The atmosphere of the Earth gets cold, incredibly cold, very, very quickly. But remember, there were nice, warm, tropical seas to begin with. We've just added another mile of very hot water from below. Is that correct? So now the Earth's oceans are very, very warm. And it's pumping a lot of humidity up into a very cold atmosphere. These are the perfect conditions to create an ice age. Now, I tell people never ever get your education from Hollywood. You know, Hollywood makes these movies about ice ages, and they make it look like the whole Earth becomes a snowball, or the ice goes all the way to the equator, but that's not true. This map shows you the maximum extent of polar ice at any time in the northern hemisphere. Now, in the southern hemisphere, it's basically the same size, but it's really not significant to us because there was nobody there. But this map shows the maximum extent of polar ice at any time in the northern hemisphere, whether you believe in creation or evolution, whatever. And we know this because of the terminal moraines, the rock left by the glaciers. So we know they actually only got this far. So let's think about this. Well, of course, the polar ice caps were not there at creation to the flood. There was no ice at the North and South Pole. But because of the events that occurred at the time of the flood of Noah, with the atmosphere getting very cold because of the volcanoes, the very warm water pumping humidity up into this very cold atmosphere, we have the perfect conditions for the formation of polar ice caps. So what happens is the ice caps start to form, and they get much bigger than they are today. They cover a lot more water in the north than today. They covered Iceland, Greenland, much of Canada, but not all of it, and small portions of the northern United States. Here, you notice it covered England, Ireland, Scotland, Scandinavia, and small portions of northern Russia, but it never got as far south as Moscow. It never got as far south as Berlin. And this map actually teaches a biblical truth. Think with me for just a moment. What is the biblical principle that this map illustrates for us? It is this: God always provides. Think with me for just a moment. How did God provide for the people, plants, and animals to stay warm after the flood of Noah in the middle of an ice age? Well, let's think for a second. When the ark landed, it was somewhere up here. We know that later they migrated back to here. This is the point of the Tower of Babel experience. They probably never saw the ice and snow for the first few generations because they're down here. But 150 years after the flood of Noah, we have the dispersion of the people across the planet. And how did God provide for the people, plants, and animals to stay warm here in the middle of an ice age? Well, remember the Earth's atmosphere is very cold, but now we have this ocean full of nice warm water that didn't used to be there. And the wind, generally speaking, goes from west to east. And so let's think. Before the flood, there were only barely gentle breezes. After the flood of Noah, we will have much stronger winds. And as the winds are moving across here from west to east, they move across the surface of this nice warm ocean, picking up heat. The winds bring the heat onto the land here, keeping the people, plants, and animals warm in the middle of an ice age. And God always provides. Isn't that interesting? Well, let me kind of wrap this up for you. You see, what I've been showing you is that the Bible is absolutely accurate about the details of the flood of Noah. Every single reference to the flood of Noah contained in the book of Genesis, in Psalm 104, verses 5 through 9, in 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 through 7, every single reference to the flood of Noah given to us in the Bible, we find in the physical evidence on the surface of the earth, and the physical evidence is in exactly the order it should be if the Bible is telling us the truth. And therefore, the Bible isn't just telling us the truth. It is not merely accurate. The Bible is hyper-accurate. Amen?